All right. Good morning, everyone. We'll start with Lama Tsongkhapa Guru Yoga, and then Geshe will lead the way for correcting motivation with refuge and Bodhichitta. On the heart of the sever of the 100 deities of the Shita, on a peak of cloud resembling climb of a stringy white fresh curd, King of Dharma, omniscient Losam Drakpa, please come here together with your sons. In the sky before me on a lion throne, lotus and moon, my perfect pure Guru smiles with delight. Supreme field of merit from a mind of faith, please abide for 100 eons to spread the teachings. Your holy mind is the intelligence that understands the full extent of objects to be known. Your holy speech with its excellent explanations is an ear ornament for those of good fortune. Your holy body is radiantly beautiful with glory renowned. To you are meaningful to see, hear, and remember are prostrate. Pleasant drinking water, various flowers, fragrant incenses, light-scented waters, and so forth. Oceans of cloud-like offerings, both actually arranged and mentally emanated. I offer to you the supreme field of merit. Whatever non-virtue of body, speech, and mind, especially those opposite to the three vows that have collected from beginningless time, and confess each and every one with fervent regret from my heart. You strove for much learning and practice in this degenerate age and made your freedoms and riches meaningful by abandoning the 8 worldly concerns. Seven, we sincerely rejoice in your extensive deeds. Perfect pure holy gurus from the billion clouds of wisdom, compassion, and sky of the Dhammakaya, please let fall a rain of fun and extensive Dhamma upon the receptacle of those to be subdued exactly as they need. May whatever virtue I've collected benefit the teachings of non-transmigrated beings, and in particular may it cause the essence of perfect pure Losam Drakpa's teachings to shine forever. Sashi Bodhi Joshi Meto Tamri Ravi Nideye Adi Sangyesh Hindu Mikte Owa Gindrokunamda Shin La Chuparshu. By the merits of having offered this mandala to Lama Tsongkhapa and his 2 sons, may I, my family members, and all sentient beings be able to meet, practice, and actualize the teachings of victorious one Losam Drakpa, who had a morality of an eminently pure way of life, was courageous in extensive conduct of the sons of the victorious ones, and accomplished the yoga of 2 stages of supreme bliss and emptiness. Idam Guru Ratnamandala Gandhiyatayami. By the force of having fervently requested in this way, hollow beams of white light are emitted from the hearts of perfect pure father and sons, and combining into one enter my crown. White nectar, the color of milk, flows from the opening with tube of white light, cleansing all my sicknesses, spirits, harm, negative karmas, and obscurations with imprints without exception. My body becomes as pure and clear as crystal. Mimetse wete chen chen rezi, jimen kembe wambo jambe yang, dupo malu jomse sanwe da, kanchen kembe tsugyen tsungaba, lo san jape shavla sowa de. Mimetse wete chen chen rezi, jimen kembe wambo jambe, dupo malu jomse sanwe da, kanchen kembe tsugyen tsungaba, lo san jape shavla sowa de. Mimetse wete chen chen Jime Kimbe Wambo Jambe Yang Dubu Malu Jomse Sanweda Kanche Kimbe Tsugen Tsungapa Lo San Chape Shala Sowa De.
Sangye Chedan Soji Chonum La Chanju Pardu Dani Kyabsuchi Dagi Chushi Jeban Dagi Drolam Benshi Sanjin Drupara Sho Sanji Chedan Sojin Chonumla Chanju Bardu Dan Kapsun Dagi Chushi Jeban Dagi Drolam Benshi Sanjin Drupara Sho Sanji Chedan Sojin Chonumla Chanju Bardu Dan Kapsun Dagi Chushi Yeban de Dagi Drolam Benshi Sanjin Drupara Shu Kangi Tudini Zone Tawa Tamchi Pambi Shere Tambi Chun Denzi Kwadam Tela Chanse Lo Good morning everyone. Anz Dirda Diri Parshin Trukinangi Tamata Sherek Parshin Samdileshas.
During the Friday morning teachings, we've been looking at Lama Tsongkhapa's text, the middling presentation on the stairs of the path of enlightenment. We have been looking at the stairs of the path of those of the great scope, and today we have reached the sixth perfection, the explanation of the sixth perfection, which is the perfection of wisdom.
Songde de Yalanda da Tamjin Tumbi Sheriff Tendu Song Shibi Sheriff T Ra Jimba Tsultrim Soba Zondu Samde Gi Parsian Tambonga Nyamlin Chiagi Nenga Tsu Di Ani Sheriff T Kibi Chet Sheriff Cheva Sawa Niwa Saba Seg the Dimjikita Ani Sheriff the Rangula Kibi Chet Ta Songba Yin Sonra.
And as Shantideva said in his Guide to Bodhisattva Way of Life at the beginning of the 9th chapter, all the branches that were taught before in the previous chapters, the Muni taught for the sake of generating wisdom. And so whatever the Buddha taught, directly and indirectly, leads us to the generation of the perfection of wisdom.
Tere dinzang ta dindigi sherab di shebalaya ani sajisums ra chupa sherab shebala sherab gingo sherab ki yewa sherab gula kitsu.
Just a second. It takes. Just a second. All right, so in looking at wisdom, how to train in wisdom is divided into three main points. The nature of wisdom, its subdivisions, and how to generate wisdom in one's mind stream.
Tertandine mandi shizong rajik shushainda tambunis chir sherabni takpi ngobola churab the number jeba yinlas chitang sherab singindi pegi that churab the number jeba senanda kanji lengi number jibi namju jilaya sherab sigori sungora.
So let's begin with the nature of wisdom. In general, wisdom is that which very thoroughly differentiates qualities in the mind that is being, in the thing that is being investigated. Which means that the nature of wisdom is a thorough differentiation, a thorough investigation of a particular thing.
Takbing obola, slavni takbing obo kanji jeba chetungink ro lengi ani chik ngota la soba 오네카리, 덴바카리, zuma카리, 어딘지기 비기다 냉이 넘버 제퉁이 들려야 아니 셰럽세고리스.
And so that which is called wisdom is that which can assess phenomena in assessing whether they're positive, negative, permanent, impermanent, whether they are true, whether they are false. That which is capable of making such assessment, such differentiation is called wisdom.
Dan dini ribini ngala keba soji 셰럽보스 라운디 깜들 제소 파신 죽난기 아니 셰럽디 셰럽드 남지비긴 셰럽자 마임바 ribini ngala ya kibi 아니 셰럽려야 셰럽티 체고를 쓴 것을.
And so in general, this is what wisdom is. But here in the context of the six perfections, which means the perfection of generosity, ethics, and so forth, when we then come to the discussion of the perfection of wisdom, it says, here it is the wisdom that is skilled in the 5 areas of knowledge and so forth. 인지케톨라 체민도 이네 딜라 진스나 진솔라도
딜라션 리그로
In general, there are 5 fields of knowledge. There are 5 great fields of knowledge and 5 secondary fields of knowledge. Where is it? Okay. So 5 great fields of knowledge, 5 secondary fields of knowledge. So within the great fields of knowledge, we have knowledge of, for example, the arts, the crafts, philosophy, compositions, and so forth.
다들이다 라당 안주 셰럽 비 냠낸 지역이 미유 타두디 산지 공반티 줘야지. 산지 공반티야 아니 숨전 탐지기 체도 다 산지 공반 다 주인 세워라 다 디인자 아니 지비 다 도시 감다 메바 쳇다와신도 시비 아니 넘버 탐지 김비 20길랑가나 다 산지 세디 차고자 다 디리 리빈닝가 먹고 다 용수 도발이야 케바지 고기여라서 용수 도발이 케바 디난가다 조 디리빈닝아티 되니 다 디난가다 난데르바세티 로나주다 추고 난데르바 피기지 우베넬루 초베르바 라소바 되니 디난가다 다리바도서 페 개침부 저단탕 안주 신기어 마마도 페 개침부 라 안주 미게 피기게 아니 국다 춘제니 미국바지길이야 안 숨자 탐질라이 팬도거나 아니 미국바질이야 팬도고 그러다 국바기 국게 개원디 바이나야 펜나 잘라야 케바지 차와나 아니 그 국비기 깨디 토니야 그 아니 가리스 삼구여바디 패시 신기연설레스 뭔데 잘라야 개원디 아니 펜나 자치우 춘제 깨 고그르세 딘지 송구도 등원 간저리니 미시 간지 아니 자티스 페마시바 라 안저 개침부 라자
저는 다이렉트 렉처 개체마로.
lecture 찍고 개체마로.
And so our final goal is the state of Buddhahood. Our final goal is attaining the state of Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. In order to be able to be of benefit to all sentient beings, we need to develop an omniscient mind, the one that knows all aspects, particularly the one that knows the dispositions of different living beings, their mentalities, the backgrounds, and so forth. This is the way in which we will be able to be of benefit to others. And so if we develop a mind that is omniscient, that knows the dispositions of others, also within the fields of knowledge of such an omniscient mind, we'll also have the knowledge of the 5 great fields of knowledge. And within the fields of knowledge, of course, for us as Buddhists, we have the knowledge of the inner mind, or the internal knowledge, which refers to the knowledge of the Buddha Dhamma. But also within that, we have skills, for example, in rhetoric, so skills in speaking or teaching. So in scripture, it is described in a particular way, and Geshe is wondering whether it is indeed as it is expressed in scripture, in the sense that do you take it literally or do you not take it literally? Like, for example, it is said that being skilled in rhetorics or in speaking and so forth might also include speaking in a language of birds and such. So Geshe is wondering whether that is to be taken as it is, but also Geshe reckons that it is also been skilled in communicating with those who, for example, cannot speak. So, or those that cannot hear you, using ways in which you can also cause them to understand.
아주 더발라 민도 만든 아주 배로 진바이너라 배우가 단 조베 롱발라 차든지 차 조베 롱발라 단 더발 메비 차카시 도스라 포로 생이 포로 단 더발 포로 세딩이 딘지 말에 첨부 슈여다 아 단다 야와겐디 춥기 남탈 나몰이야 야와겐디 좀 친주 걸이야 비다 아니 donta khashiji ma do ma songko control ani gombu chagdu bege ani namtru ani poroji ki songyub chiya ta lorgi je ta porodi nganzu phele yorda chembu shujare porodi ke din jam de jagro porodi ke jam de jadi the me gemba to so tri porodi thoke jagdos netsu yagu jung sar la ta ngonerda choron la da pu porodi ke khenza jadu yagu mundu la da Geshe Jadamba yosalda. Tinansinki cha tatajer. Kyaga tamuse. Kim tongra pelamde tongra. Yugurin buyangi. Tiro shokin samzamla ani tanganzu drobarawa. Kurgangla pabchini kech jagda. Samzamla ke tsaw shuje. Tudita pama gengodos ani ji sangda dugbatinti dugur. Tiri yaguya samaris. Pina simjin changki zero dan. Chi yonsaris. Kyaga tamuti ke jadan. Samsala ku ke jagro. Ta tirin drumba yonsaris. Di yondarda. Kenza di shiver da diri da. Chikji di kukbaro da. Chikji di koran le chiyorda. Geshe jadama ku nganzu chiudu ke jawn samsala chiudu ke jawn koran ruru chayungdo. Ah, sin shu jagdo. Geshe jadama da nganzu magore mato dat kogo mar mato kunju dilya. Geshe yobad geshe jadama redos. Di ta dala keba chama geshe jadi kogo serta.
So being skilled in languages or in rhetorics, not only the language of humans, but also the languages of other living beings. Geshe said, just kind of as an anecdote, being born in Eastern Tibet into a family of nomads, there's some birds that they have in Eastern Tibet, and of course don't exist here. Like, for example, the ravens are massive. They have massive ravens, and also the way that the ravens talk to each other, or the calls, are quite specific. They have a variety of calls. In the biography of the 6th Dalai Lama, Gyalwa Gendun Drop, there is a story about the 6th Mahakala taking the form of a raven when the Dalai Lama was just a few weeks old, manifesting as a protector of Gyalwa Gendun Drop. Anyway, those ravens in Eastern Tibet, where Geshe comes from, have a variety of callings, and some of them are quite you can say quite coarse or ugly, and some of them are quite pleasant. So when you hear a raven calling, sometimes you interpret it as either a good omen or a bad omen. So if the calling is quite coarse or not that pleasant, then it might be foretelling of something unpleasant that is due to happen. So people kind of become a little bit careful. Or there is another bird called, I think it's called Kyagyatamo.
Yeah, Jakatamo.
I don't know what kind of bird is it, but it has a long tail. Anyway, Geshe, having grown up in a family of nomads in a tent, basically, sometimes when this bird alights on the top of the tent and starts calling, the elderly people in the family encampment would gather some incense or other substances and make offerings to it, because it's quite auspicious. But there's a particular calling of that bird also that sounds a little bit alarming. And when it sounds its calling, then you know that something negative might happen. Like, for example, there might be a raid of wolves taking down some of the animals of the family encampment and so forth. So Geshe says that certainly, maybe kind of it's just superstitions that Tibetans have, but certainly there are some calls of birds that have particular meanings, and also they understand each other's calls. And so here, anyway, going back to the topic, being skilled in the rhetorics or languages, this is one of the expertise or skills that one develops on the way to Buddhahood.
Jada nyenga tiktugo da serala tab tima do peshi shugu jagala ya ro ani pena sera cheda wajimbaina dra tiktungi kuchunde mado yosamare kongi dra tiktugo kongi dra tis tior kashik tis janyo da na sosu doina janyo mesro
Jatia dila kara labgira dila somi labgira be kerik ni dra labgira be kara labgira.
Keri mari ko dadi kedi pyoge tone yongor ina drajon yoro drajon kora ani tsawadan dra mixe yor
So sama pyitola
pyoge di legjer ni tsu gyurgyurendo chipena drain do da drando kalabase so ni drai tenju mambu orada.
And so it's not only being skilled in language, it's also becoming more specifically very skilled, very knowledgeable of grammar. And so Geshe hasn't had the opportunity to train in that. And by the way, kind of the training in grammar in English is quite different to training in grammar either in Tibetan, in Sanskrit. To train in grammar in Tibetan or Sanskrit and so forth is a very particular skill. So if you can talk or if you can write, it doesn't mean that you can compose things in a correct grammatical fashion. Anyway, some of you might have heard of Chodar Rinpoche. That was one of the great masters that came out of Seraje Monastery. And he was considered to be a very skilled person, not only in grammar, but also in poetry. So for those of you who had a chance to meet Chodar Rinpoche, there was no one that could rival him at Seraje Monastery in his ability to teach grammar, relying upon ancient texts, different commentaries and treatises. So he was, let's say, the master of teaching grammar and composition at Sera Monastery.
Tendirda sorigba ani dizope kechembure dasra pena sorigba do jimbana donga gi shon chanzang jilya jani da nyamlen tashimba chiga chebala pena sorigba do ro pigi tanganzu goda pena nganzu gi doi jelaya the gyu nga tawndi ani nga kalaya ani pena kinkur yoras ra kinkur ti the changzang ji singoda lelan jawo 창장 신고다디 안 두서 아니 계신부 쇼지래다스라 내가 안주다디 비게 다 고미야데 다 고미야데 다 락베기 약부치 소 마시나 샘라야 치마치진 곰세디 깔카고 쇼라 어 두서 참만다 조르기 비나마야 두기요레스
Or the knowledge of the crafts. This is also important, particularly when you when you see how it is supplementary to the study of Sutra and Tantra. Like, for example, when you study and then train in Tantras, you train in visualizing an immeasurable mention, which is the abode of a certain deity that you meditate upon. And so it is a three-dimensional representation of the abode of a deity. And so you need to know all the details, the proportions, and so forth. And so to be skilled in crafts is also being skilled in being able to create it in an actual form. So either you create it, as a sculpture or carving or what have you. If you can create it physically with your hands, then also in your meditation, you will know how to construct it in your mind as an inestimable mention with all the details.
언데다 데니 다니바니스 셰르브기 야와딜야 된덤 또바당 군습 또바 숨진기 된차와 또비 셰르브 소모스
And so looking at the subdivisions, we have three subdivisions: the wisdom realizing the ultimate, the wisdom realizing conventionalities, and the wisdom realizing the welfare of sentient beings.
들다 디코디 당한전 상통 갑둘야다 10진 차와디 된덤 또바당 군습 또바 셰르브디 용거라다 심진기 된차와 또비 셰르브디다 만주다 공도 sombi penata ninjidan chanjuk sem gomdang gi rimbajiata di chanzang ani sinada di sumjin tenchawa topic sherap di chagorasra.
And so looking at the subdivisions of wisdom, the wisdom realizing the ultimate, the wisdom realizing conventionalities. Here in this section, we have a succinct presentation of the perfection of wisdom, and the following section of the text will give a detailed presentation of the way to develop the fifth perfection, which teaches absorption in terms of the meditation on shamatha, calm abiding, and then the meditation on the wisdom of special insight. So all the details, all the subtle details with respect to the wisdom realizing the ultimate and the wisdom realizing conventionalities will be taught later on in the text, in this section of the text that is called special insight. So we have another type of wisdom here, which is realizing the welfare of sentient beings. So to develop that wisdom, we develop compassion and the mind of enlightenment in stages. And so if we develop the mind of enlightenment, compassion, and the other components, will also be developing the wisdom that realizes the welfare of sentient beings.
Tatambunis dami yite konani tenchi gonin jawata ngondu kyubi gonin jawa kanji dame peki tenchi tsuki tokbata ngonsum du tokbi shereb ni yungres sungwarta di
So the first, referring to the wisdom realizing the ultimate. The first is the wisdom comprehending the suchness, that is selflessness, by means of a generic image, which means a conceptual realization of suchness, of emptiness. It uses a generic image. The second type of wisdom realizing the ultimate is the wisdom comprehending the suchness, that is selflessness, by means of something manifest, which means a perceptual realization.
타들이다 요트 산도르다 다 다음에 이 다음에 세티 Sixty tenda that thing sabu shoot. Then rogo rosra. The Kaptulaya dark me seg 60 tenda rodi. Dark sedi sosuranyelaya. Kansalaya. Ro pigi so dengi kevulaya. Dark sevores. The did dagre. Ona di yorwas. Diona dark loas. Ro pigi chala dagbo jangi. Gomba dagbo jangi. Any chick penjor songing dark loas lavaina. Any dinamolia, dame catching la waters, dark mess and catching la waters, rather tindigi, and the chivoteling lamni shabana, dark mess, said Manzugi now somebody, near curious, now something, nadi, dardi, piggy, touchy Raman Sananda, dodo, piggy, touch huge piglia, any Kyoda Nasagi, Kyolaya Matibi Nachi Pigi and Rawangi Trubachik and Chargi or Asra, the Dichargora, the Dicharva Nanshinjiki dark Mebainsa, and dark mess. Or Dilla was the Dilla Goris.
And so described in the wisdom realizing the ultimate, it says that it is the wisdom comprehending the suchness that is selflessness. So the word selflessness is a complex word. The philosophy of selflessness is very deep. And so when we think of this term directly, selflessness, it first of all begins with self, which refers to a self. And so we are living beings. We are living beings. We know as living beings, when we refer to I or me, we refer to ourselves. So this is the self. And so we exist, right? We exist and we refer to ourselves in a variety of ways. Like, for example, as beings that exist, we possess things. We are the owner of things. We are we make money or we accumulate wealth. We can own a house, or you can say that this gompa, for example, belongs to me. So we exist. So the self exists. And so why are we talking about selflessness in this section? If we exist, what is the meaning of the absence of selflessness in that sense? Well, it has to do with investigating the way that we appear to our mind when we think of I or me. So when we think I, or when we think they, there is a certain appearance that dawns to our mind. And the appearance that dawns to our mind is of ourself as I or me, that is independent, that is concrete, that exists completely onto itself without depending upon others. It exists in and of itself. And so I or me or the self doesn't exist in a way that it appears. This is what we mean when we say selflessness, that there is that appearance of ourself as if we exist independently in and of ourselves. And we do not exist in a way that agrees with that appearance.
The sound down by the shoe pink to say the Kashigi Nima Kunara, Dame Gomna Nikudusa, and Jacha Yadam was Namijigra. Nima Kuni, Mani Regidi, Nima Kuni, Namdara, the Nikusamare, the Sunny Lega drawer, the Kachigona, the shade of Jingo Mendro, Samsonsa, Namijigra. Rea. Ani then you could individual the Nachi some they cut the Nakoran Kandachi or something. Nakoran be yourself to someone that done. Bedding issues. Kibu maybe come the Jazjada, Makibi Kadula, Makibi Kadula, Naki some Nadi chick 세바이나 야세 야다 맞더니 기분에 비춰 락 투도 생이 망부 연구도 왔어요.
So if we think about it, it can prove very useful, very helpful. Geshe had a conversation with one of his friends who told him one day that there was a night in which he found it difficult to fall asleep. So he was lying in bed, he was wondering kind of what to do in order to get some sleep. Should he listen to music? Should he do some reading? What can he do in order to fall asleep? And so there is that sense of I or me that arose in his mind when he was thinking about it, with a sense of malaise or something that is not really comfortable. And he said that when he started to observe that sense of self and investigate, how does the self exist? Does it exist in the way that it appears to my mind? He said that he was he fell asleep quite quickly, was fast asleep. And so certainly such practices can help, particularly at times in which a mind feels unwell or unhappy. So there's a strong sense of I that appears to our mind when we are unhappy, when we are unwell. And when we investigate that sense of self that arises in our mind, we check whether it exists in the way that it appears to our mind, that strong sense of self started to dampen. Now we lose, or that strong sense of self is being lost when we start to look into it.
The Langland is another Tongoma didn't some tango grasra, Madamang, Chejikita, and the Lamrim do stay on the any Kishishu di, any dame of a topic, Sherevlia, Jarioris, Gasichim Sholia, so did just of passing Tuki, Yamlingi, Nanga Tadu di, Sherevi Cheturis. Sonrada sanji chomden dewa ya pegi nyamling so di sherab dinanchi sherab tobgi ani nimupang ani sanji wach ro ani nyara rajawina so dame tobgi sherab kombal din sanji wa o dindi jiro nga chu na di shegor de ne ya tenda ngoma di nga chu chigi singe zog sherab so chigi yo mares labaina ani 백갈에 가버린 다스라 지 소소라니 지 기부지용 쇼 산선 기부지용하게 체도되니 비길이야 지 아니 탑라마부 지 세대야마도 나 기부지용하게 체도 삼진 나드 비기 자친부 도도지 샤시 디여다 메 톨이야 삼로 제마당시 아니 디피 디송교 체도되니 탑시 샴바지 체는 로데바나 아니 샘레야 남자다 마기버던 되고 마카와라 소보 용대지 마도 아니 기부지다 야자자다 뭐 차기여서 말이스 로 비 도도 차대 도도 코란 누문도 상로지 담바이나 도도 코란 자원이 많이 비 갑둘라 니지 여바진 바이나 타고 짜치무 손 초고르고 니지 여러 디 매바질이야 디 짜치무 손이 아니 답시 셴바 주베바나 뒤주 졸라 주고 여바 다 야시야다 말해봤으라.
And so this is something that we need to incorporate into our practice, the development of wisdom. And so not only we speak about it, but it's also important to then put it into practice. When we look at the importance of the development of wisdom as it is found in scripture, in the presentation of the Lamrim, the steps of the path to enlightenment, this is the most important section of the text, the wisdom that realizes selflessness. And Shantideva in his writings also emphasized the importance of wisdom. The importance of wisdom, as we said at the beginning of the 9th chapter, it says, all that was taught before was taught for the sake of generating wisdom. And it is taught for finally developing wisdom. And the same thing you can find in the teachings of the Buddha, the Bhagavan. An emphasis on the development of wisdom. For if we develop wisdom, we'll be able to use it in order to eliminate our own disturbing emotions or afflictive states of mind, and thereby become Buddhas. But also, if we just stick to attain the state of liberation, as to Hinayana practitioners, hears or sorry to realizes, that also depends upon the development of wisdom, of selflessness, that will eliminate the afflictions and thereby lead to the state of liberation. And therefore, when we look at our own personal practice, if we consider ourselves to be Buddhist practitioners, then we need to check whether we are practicing the development of wisdom. Do we incorporate the development of wisdom into a personal practice? It's hard, isn't it? So when we think of what we try to do in a practice, what motivates a practice is the thought, may I be happy, may I be well. And we try to come up with ways of developing happiness and well-being. But if we do so in holding on to this reified sense of self, to a concrete sense of self, our practice would be oriented towards finding ways to make this concrete self, this reified self, be happy, be well, to protect this kind of self. And on the long term, it's not going to be that useful or helpful. So long as we hold on to that concrete sense of self and try to fix, protect, contribute to a reified sense of self, it's not going to work on the long term. We're not going to be able to make it well. Since we cannot really find a concrete independent sense of self if we're going to look for it. And so if we do spend our energy or our time in trying to make a concrete sense of self that doesn't exist in actuality, be happy, be well, and so forth, definitely we'll be putting a lot of effort and wasting a lot of time along the way.
Teresa, do dan je ondigi that manzugi tembi dabu tembo chomdendigi son je vaina tenala ya mansh di dame batobi sherab kor songorasra dame batobi sherab kor sondi tatsu da pigi da yotsu tolya ani chebacheni da yotsu pigi ngazugi ani chi namgyugi lolhengilaya nawanashingi da ti yoda meg tolya chebachi ten ribig lamni ani nawanashinji mebadi ani pedan rigbadan tinji toni ani da yum gendu dünsum la soba an samalo dindi janjan ras da dindi janjan di kor janjan son yoras da di jinjun gombulu yapsa la soba ani chi je ani pawtome yapsa la soba ani cholan chura yapsa la soba da dinima ani 조지 yapsa soba samalogi nenga chishu di ani dame tobi기 셰럽 돌이야 송요레스 아니 디기 진주다 벽이 아니 개방 아마초 하던데 장관놈 증거버 쳔비 보드접게 난다 만슈디 아니 dame tobi 셰럽 돌이야 송요레스 그래서 개체슈 디차건다 다 디돌 송요레 딘상 간주에다 툭나 마투나야 안 디돌이야 슈갑니 라 리버드림니 아니 제주 체바나다 야자자탄 바드니 간주 레 고사들이야 레 투야게 레어여 왔으라
So the Buddha, the Bhagavan, a lot of the teaching taught mostly of wisdom that realizes selflessness. So investigating the teachings of the Buddha, we can see that the majority of the teachings of the Buddha principally are focusing on the development of wisdom of selflessness. And so what we seek to do is to develop an understanding of the way that we exist, the way that the self exists, how it exists, and how it doesn't exist. Because often we completely assent to the appearances that dawn to our mind. So we, or the self, appear to our mind in a particular way, and we assume that it exists in a way that it appears to us. But really, when we start to investigate whether we exist in a way that we appear to our mind, whether the self exists in a way that it appears, we find that there is a discrepancy between them. And that mode of investigation was taught extensively in the teachings of the Buddha. Like, for example, the Buddha taught the three extents of the perfection of wisdom sutras: the extensive, the middling, the abridged presentation of the perfection of wisdom sutras using analogies and a system of logic in order to exclusively teach the wisdom that realizes selflessness. And following that came great Indian scholars, such as, for example, Nagarjuna and his spiritual children, Asanga and his spiritual children, Dignaga, Dharmakirti, Jyotiatisha, and so forth. And investigating the teachings that were given by those great scholars, the majority of those teachings mostly are involved with wisdom of selflessness. And it's not just those Indian scholars, but also looking at Tibetan scholars, such as the great Tsongkhapa that composed a set of 18 volumes of teachings. Again, most of those teachings are oriented towards the developing wisdom that realizes selflessness. So this is the most important thing. And so now we need to assess our ability to develop that wisdom. Can we study those teachings and develop wisdom? And so when we put effort, when we put our energy into the development of wisdom, we can discover that there's something that we can do. It is within our reach.
들다 다음에 때 권능이 된주고는 자와서야디 간지 다 비기 다 요축 톨이야 로 삼로 다운디 간줄로야 나와난신기 아니 매바디 탁제 투바로치 디다 야치자다마 레문도 삼비기 로디다 된주고는 자비기 로라야 샤초그레스 로 탁제 투에다디 dini besivu shuch pegi metsul di ani nawananshi metsul di ta sivu shuch uni semlaya charyongya chi yungores da di se ngondu kyur sad dame ba ngondu kyur sadi sivu shuch tonya delya ngondu kyur ngonsum toba sadi indichi ton sungores ro.
And so looking at the evolution of the wisdom realizing the ultimate, it says the first is the wisdom comprehending the suchness, which means reality, that is selflessness by means of a generic image. Which is to say that we can follow an analytical process that investigates whether we exist in the way that we appear. And at the end of this analytical process, rational process, we can resolutely conclude that we do not exist in a way that we appear to ourselves. And so this non-existence in the way that we appear to ourselves is first of all done into our mind using the facility of a generic image. Right? So we reach a conclusion that is involved with a generic image of not existing in a way that conforms to the mode of appearance. And then we continue to meditate on that deeply, single-pointedly and deeply, to the point in which this wisdom that comprehends selflessness becomes wisdom with utmost clarity, which means that it becomes the wisdom comprehending the suchness that is selflessness by means of something manifest. It becomes a perceptual realization of selflessness.
That concept of sherabdi revealing alanki sherabdi concept senada pigi nangwi guchu nangsu nangzulaya nangdeyak ro ani ngos tongdeyak nyongwe chobdeyak antusulaya concept guchus ro nyongwe chobdeyak ani re concept of sherabs.
The second is the wisdom that is skilled in the 5 areas of knowledge. So the second refers to the wisdom realizing conventionalities. And so such conventionalities are those things which appear to us perceptually, things that we can validate through our own experience. And so this wisdom realizing conventionalities is skilled in the 5 areas of knowledge.
Da sumbani simjingi dishi tuen kana mantowa meba drupsu shibadi simjingi tuen chavi sherab.
And the third, which is the wisdom realizing the welfare of sentient beings, consists in knowing how to accomplish without misdeeds, the welfare of sentient beings in this and future lives.
Sumbani Sherab Gulaki Sutre.
No.
Sherab Ki Magi Payudan Yemi Samba Yinla Tambuni Sherab Gavale Sherab Gavadin Gomulu Song in by Yusons. Tonda Manton Yondin du Kungizawa Sheroin. Tedrinica Dribisha Sheroyons Sonwacha. Shesos. Dore do Gomulu Song in the Tinda Yinjina. Shesos.
The third is, so how to generate wisdom in one's mind stream is the third main point in the presentation of the perfection of wisdom. The third is to think about the benefits of generating wisdom and the faults of not generating it. First, in the 100 verses on wisdom, it says, the root of all excellent qualities, the seen and the unseen, is wisdom. Thus, wisdom should be fully embraced in order to accomplish both.
Chanju Samba Longbo Shaji and Pingi Tombole Lambata Najeda Shimba Soji Namdoki Mangirani Sherigi Tekonani Undukiwal. Yinla, Sishu Gubantomi Sherigi, Sutrum Jendun the Dribut, Sutrum Taba Chabatan, Muzoba the Zuviki Sherigi Toni, Sem Turbi, Logrutan Dungariki Montobatan, Sherigi Tundri Zombi, Lebershini, Telezombi, Lamgi Saju Chavatan. Tekonani Tuanani, something you got in Choni, Rigby Sulatembi, Sherigi Dribber Chebi, Jenso Passion Tambonga Yonsu Taba Chavani, Sherab Rally Sauce.
The complete purity of the first five perfections, generosity and so forth, depends on wisdom. Although a bodhisattva gives his own flesh to someone who asks him for it, like offering a leaf from a medicinal plant, he does not do it with the discursive thoughts of pride, discouragement, and so forth. Rather, he does it out of the suchness manifested by wisdom. When he practices ethics for the welfare of others, he purifies his ethics with a wisdom that sees the flaws of both cyclic existence and the peace of nirvana. His mind is subdued by means of the wisdom realizing the faults of impatience and the excellent qualities of patience, and so he is not consumed by offense and suffering. By means of wisdom, he understands well the basis for undertaking joyous effort and exerts himself in that, whereby there is great progress on the path. By means of the wisdom realizing on a process of reasoning, he achieves the supreme joyful bliss of the meditative civilization that abides in the meaning of suchness. That's all.
Tangawar Navi Yondini Sherabdan Dembe Mangawa Drubanis.
Those endowed with wisdom can accomplish without any contradiction two excellent qualities that appear to be opposed.
Tabena Jomden Digi, any Chema Sondi, Duji Kamda Mebala Digi, Dingilata Sonra, Kaukalaya, Chik Pigi. Ani Da Yabatao, Kaukolaya, Da Mebatao. Adu Da Meba Dingisondia, the Dini Kaptula Devaina, Chi couple years, la couple mason di Gavaras, the Dinam Jugi, Sherabgi, any Tony Devaina, any Gava Mebadi, Ton to Gores, Benadinidoj, Sungora, the
And when the section says those endowed with wisdom can accomplish without any contradiction two excellent qualities that appear to be opposed, it is to say, for example, that when looking at the teachings that the Buddha, the Bhagavan, gave, we can recognize that they were given to living beings, to students or disciples of different dispositions, and therefore the Buddha gave teachings that accord with the dispositions of others. To some, the Buddha, for example, taught that the self exists, while to others, the Buddha taught that the self does not exist. And so looking at those teachings just in terms of what they express, there are seeming contradictions. But those endowed with wisdom can bring those two teachings together and resolve them in a way that is not contradictory.
이건 서로랑 참 멜로디에 걸어. Sorry. 다dir다 달 장섬 링실랑 온규위 코규기 야부 결과나 로땅간졸라야 도야망부 직차와이나 도인기 온든 줘야기 땅인가 빼침부여라다 장주선바초 콜루규위 야부다위 결과이나 양 도인기 온든 문주와니 셰르기 롬보데 뎀빈 튀인라스 대전도 숨진 이동 통 장바 슈타장 대차 종세제 문제와당스 심진기 동할라 무즈비 인지 슈타라 균지와 예장 냥인기 뇌니 개발라 무주이 레로메바당 가와체메다 대야 셈 미월리 양위 야야보 메바당 땅님 첨부 균도 대야 드위텐라 깨지게 메야와니 셰르기 체데 대다 똥송수 주비 객 셰르기 고비체로스 나왕하들리 춘이 돌아오면서 군주 당연 지수툰 셰송바따르 생기 믹대 차서 둘점이야 마트발라 신진기 신진 덴진기 믹대 차서 둘점이야 마트발라 네바 친구 입이 춘이 돌 무거바다 친난기 규견린 제부소소 좀알라 네바 띵 타바니 입이 군주 당연 뭔가시 제순돈 로이 투메발라 최신돈 가와양 셰럽잖아 뭔가시 통바다 양 데니엘리 나와탄 까발라 쿄가라라 찍둥이 라라니바 말라라 펜송 가야 만치수 시송 받달 대바 공원다 동안이라 난가 먼저 만두여바다 대놈 강사 지기 냠슬렘바 니 송럽 람좀 유곰보 소발라 로이 투메발라 가야 케발라 મંગા와야 셰르기 제바이노스
Then the text says, were a bodhisattva to become a universal monarch with power over the 4 continents, the minister of wisdom would prevent his succumbing to this sway of desirable objects. And so this section refers to the way that we react to having an abundance of objects of desire, where we seems to be, rather than be in control of objects of desire, they end up controlling us. So, if we have too much in that sense, we become, in those sense, you can say slave to our own objects of desire. Whereas those bodhisattvas, when the text says, were a bodhisattva to become a universal monarch, which means someone that has a great access to resources, to objects of desire and so forth, with power over the 4 continents, the minister of wisdom would prevent this bodhisattva to succumb to the sway of desirable objects. Likewise, although his love that sees sentient beings as likable is very strong, he is not even slightly mixed with attachment. Although he has lasting and intense compassion that cannot bear the suffering of sentient beings, he is without the laziness that is oppressed by sorrow and that does not delight in virtue. Although he possesses immeasurable joys without the restlessness that distracts the mind from a focal object. Although he possesses great and continuous equanimity, does not neglect the welfare of sentient beings, even for an instant. This is all owing to wisdom, because wisdom eliminates the obstacles, accomplishing a balanced strength. The praise of one worthy of praise says, they accord with conventionalities without discarding ultimate reality. Thus, there is no need to discard ultimate reality. the great certainty one has gained that not even a mere particle of the referent object whose signs are being apprehended is established, which is, Geshe said, it's another way of realizing that there's not even a mere particle of true existence in whatever phenomena, right? So there's no need to discard that ultimate reality. You can gain great certainty in the absence of true existence. Thus, that is not contradictory to, but in agreement with the fact that conventionalities are found through a profound certainty that individual effects arise from their individual inner and outer causes and conditions. Although these are grossly contradictory for those without a sharp mind, for those who possess wisdom, they are compatible and not contradictory. And so the same text says, this is in honor, praise of the worthy of practice. So the same text says, regarding permissions and prohibitions, some of your words are definitive, whereas others are not. Still, there's no contradictions amongst them. Thus, there are many contradictory permissions and prohibitions in the higher and lower vehicles and in Sutra and Tantra. And at the same time, they are to be practiced by a single person. Those without a sharp mind who seek the meaning of the countless scriptures see these two as contradictory, whereas the skilled do not. This is too owing to wisdom.
아니 요다 상황디 아니 셔럽기 남주기 만단이라다 셔럽기 만단이 차거레스 라 아니 다디바다 통바다 더 상황로 셔럽이었나 제토그레스 라 아니 간주 샘비게 샘마기바 용야디야 아니 다 뉴몽그 소거라다 라로 추시직 로 로바직 라로 따나지기 되니 아니 촉슬롱지 아니 촉슬롱디기다 아니 찬냠고 말다 로 차마님디 아니 뇨다 차거다 로 찬냠부지 돌아야 데투바나 뇨다 기요 말다 뇨다 마용에디 셔럽소 그레스 뇨다디 뉴뭉소 그레스 간지 디자당 안솔에 셔럽 고담 모고디 아니 디톤다 탁주 투게식 리스
And so without wisdom, we might attempt to make things work perfectly right for us, but it will not work out. And so when the mind becomes unwell, unhappy, disturbed, which means that there are different afflictions operating in our mind, it becomes partial, biased. It is unbalanced. When a mind becomes as such, we experience problems, difficulties. If a mind is balanced, there will be no problems. And so the thing that eliminates imbalances are wisdom. So long as a mind is lacking wisdom, a mind will still be lacking balance, which means that there will still be problems that we will experience.
Teda sanji chu nangla ya nganzu panggoya di nyumu shagoras ro jadang nganzu la ya mugo di nyumu res imba ina ya sherabgi 아니 남주기 단 당기 여바이나 라 당기 여바이나 뉴무 임바이나야 피게 아니 산지드위야기 아니 타블레야 귤투야 아니 심징기 텐치야기 아니 귤레야 귤투야 딘디잉고라스라 디 셔럽기 다 간지 셔럽라라레 되바치 로 야다 두세디 셔럽라라레 되바치 셔럽 메바이나 아니 진소 파신 가르라바이나야 로 파신 담봉가 가르라바이나야 아니 가서다 뉴문도 초스 줘야지 마도 아니 깔카고래도 왔으라.
And so from the perspective of the Buddha Dhamma, our afflictive states of mind are the things that we seek to abandon. They are objects of abandonment, they are the things that we seek to eliminate. And so if a wisdom becomes sufficient, we can use even the afflictions as methods that assist a pursuit after enlightenment. If a wisdom is sufficient, we can also use the afflictions for benefiting other sentient beings. And thus, it all depends upon wisdom. Without wisdom, we will lack the support for the practice of the 6 perfections, which means that the 6 perfections will actually be supported by our own afflictions, which will be hard going.
Nyeming the sherab maybe nyeming sherab the tana jinso ngata tawa tabal mingiwani parchen dubale sherab menan debutunyala jimba danyen number tamingur jendun tami jimbi chokji song tama nober tengi joayin shedan sherab nami mamba masil na sutum tak ta dember temingur parche sherab maybe sutum tak shibi kengi nyumun yokjingur shedan sherab lobi kengi sem yona Zebi yonden tela nemumi legni tola megi sunchanshin yonden mebi gala takbashin shedans keba namla purtun kak gyurjin teli tashin saba shemeba debi kengi yonsu madribi yiglam trambo sherab memundu shedan sherab tsola zöme lo chana teyi tawa yonsu takmingyur shesu tela gala takbani yonden mebi gabula takba len jing jonya nyamnen rose.
And so we spoke of the benefits of having wisdom. Next, Dhamma Tsongkhapa explains the drawbacks of lacking wisdom. So separated from wisdom, the other 5, generosity and so forth, and the view will not be pure. The Compendium of the Perfection says, in those who strive for results in the absence of wisdom, their giving does not purify. It was taught that the best generosity is to benefit others, and the rest only serve to increase wealth. And if wisdom's light does not dispel the darkness, one will not come to possess pure ethics. In the absence of wisdom, that discipline will mostly be disturbed by afflictions through flawed understanding. An excellent qualities of patience will not remain in one's mind if it is disturbed by faults of distorted wisdom. Nor will fame remain for a king without excellent qualities, who hates to examine what is good and what is faulty. And continuing, this is extolled as sublime for the learned. There is nothing more subtle and deep. Without wisdom, the mind will not take the straight path, completely obscured by the faults of desire. And then with respect to the view, it says, some believe wisdom's way does not involve effort. The view will not become completely pure. As for a king's fame, here, a king who lacks excellent qualities may find fame once, but it will degenerate and pass.
This
Maybe.
Tena sherab gigola di gyuya number tagwi shongla lonu dan tunu tuba cheba des parchen dubale tunyo minglu gombi surmishi teme tegu chishik sambarcha dewe tela somja tegule samshin gombi sherab yamba chong shesos jitun chambe kyang korsum number toba kan teni shishi dribande sena laso nam tokan teni nyumu dribande sherab lejen dadane pongyu sheme ti ichi sherab choyin deshene tuba deshir tuba chok che songsos abdu le kyang zoja tuba tsawarcha teni naksu nebarcha nyambar shala zunchashin sheso tambang kama namgi shalni kyang har tubi chönam lola ruki yoba chela yang dang yang du sembar che jabar che toba che gu chu jetu chugni semzin kyangba rela loba tela chogme gomchen rabla tombarab tembarab gomchen rila tembar ringu yin chetsam gomba tetsam du chu shiba chechir roshi gu tetar sambi ngishi tangna Gemegi Samba Tamji Toba Yimbe, Panja Yinshi, Digdoki Saravatan, Chöne Tedar Mason, Gevi Shinyan, Tedar Mishin Yamni, Kuyakala Mineva Shion, Tena Tebani, Pagri Shere Mebatela, Ani Mukalatana Gutro, Govikalatana Gutro, Chunajend Tisela, Danyamne Katrik Sar Drosongo, Sherab Lubitsi, Passion Truden the Chavani, Sherab Nini, Sherab Shen Sherab Langobani, Sherab Jimbayama, Hamaning, Hamashenos.
Therefore, it is necessary to generate wisdom. It's because hearing completely pure scriptures in accordance with one's mental capacity is set out in the companion of the perfections. One who studies little is blind and doesn't know how to meditate. Without that, what understanding would someone reflect on? So from the cause of putting effort into studying arises vast wisdom through meditation with reflection. The Venerable Maitreya also says in his sublime continuum, the Uttara Shastra, conceptualization of the three spheres is posited as an obstruction to omniscience. Conceptualizations like miserliness are posited as afflictive obscurations. There is no cause apart from wisdom that eliminates these, and therefore wisdom is supreme, since study is its basis, study is supreme. And the companion of trainings in verse says, you should be patient, you should pursue study, then you should retreat to a forest, strive at equipoise meditation. The holy beings of the past also said to first gather together in your mind the Dhamma you have studied, then reflect on it repeatedly, appraise it, and investigate it. Training merely to focus the mind is of no help if you allow yourself to forget the Dhamma. The highest teachings are suitable for excellent meditators, and intermediate teachings are suitable for intermediate meditators. One's knowledge of the Dhamma should grow to the same extent as one meditates. Once this certainly has grown firm through such contemplations, you will no longer listen to the words of bad companions who say all virtues and non-virtuous thoughts are to be abandoned because they are conceptuality. Rather, you will think the Dhamma does not teach anything like that, and my teacher also does not assert that. And you will not listen to them. Lacking that, someone who has a little bit of faith but no wisdom will burst into tears when he sees a crying face and will burst into laughter when he sees someone who is laughing. Considering true what people say, like a river, he will go wherever he is led. When you train in wisdom, make it possess the six perfections. The generosity of wisdom is to abide in the state of wisdom oneself and to establish it in others. The remaining ones are as above.
Tadiyanjigi Parshin Truki Korti Sonsambareja. Tadini Nibadi Dui Mubushel Lapsu Sage. Sungosari Re. Nibani Jimbaning har Pashinji Kapsu Shepatan Jala Dui Mubushilde. Nyemban Mawani Dujala Pashinam Tembati Duji Tunjabani Chetar Tembi Tun Ten Namla Duja Jodun Jubao Yantaba Lendun Juba Tun Tumbani Shenam Tun Kanla Java Tela Ran Nini Tedam Tumbal Fabati Ani Dordigenles Jinsung Tedun Lenjutan Dani Chesun Jugnamji Nyembar Madan Tunjutan Tundun Yindun Debai Shesos.
And so the next section in the text is the 4 ways of gathering disciples. So this section follows the general presentation of the 6 perfections. So a while ago in the text, we've looked at the way to generate bodhicitta, and then having generated bodhicitta, the text explains the way to practice the deeds of bodhisattvas. The way to practice the deeds of bodhisattvas was divided into two sections. The first was how to practice the 6 perfections. So we've now finished with a general explanation of how to practice the 6 perfections. Then the second part that explains the practices of bodhisattvas explains the way to gather. So the 4 ways of gathering disciples is training in 4 ways of gathering disciples that ripens the minds of others. And in explaining that, it says generosity is the same as explaining in the context, as explained, sorry, in the context of the perfections. So that's the first way of gathering, through generosity. Then pleasant speech is to teach the perfections to disciples. That's the second. Meaningful conduct is to encourage disciples to engage in the meaning they were taught, or to induce them to correctly adopt them. Then lastly, to act in accord with the meaning is to abide in the meanings one has introduced to others and train accordingly. And so to supplement that, Maitreya's ornament for the Mahayana Sutra says, generosity is as before, while teaching it. Making others adopt it and engaging it oneself are asserted respectively to be pleasant speech, meaningful conduct, and accord with the meaning.
number sangi chug toni ani jendun chitsulti ra jendun chitsulki ta dromshirodi ani doing over shit chagores ra ta dingan the jela shuna dixari ra.
And so this section teaches another way of benefiting others as found in the Buddha Dhamma. And this way of benefiting others in the Buddha Dhamma is said to be through the 4 ways of gathering. But it seems that the time is running out for this session, so we will keep the main explanation of how the 4 ways of gathering to the next session. Have you got any questions? Just a second. Thank you.
I could have just misheard what you said. But so I guess my question is, you talked about, I thought I heard you say that there is such a thing as conventional, a conceptual experience of conventional bodhicitta. So let me say that again. A perceptual meditation on conceptual. Myself all caught up now. So there's conceptual and perceptual realizations. So I thought I heard you say that you can have a conceptual realization of conventional bodhicitta. Did I hear you say that?
I don't think that we spoke about it yesterday, but I don't believe that we spoke about it today, but we can still ask Geshe about it.
No, I thought I heard you say, that there. So yeah, what would the difference between a conceptual realization and a perceptual realization of conventional bodhicitta look like?
Okay. Dila sheragi parchin di Geshe gabdu dila duntan tope sherab dila rimba ni shadwa pambo dunchi tsugi topa ni dijela onsun topa sedi. Takurandi tata koyo me nyaba mindus ine krangi chanchugi sem se di dunchi tsugi topa tan onsun topa dendechi sheyo especially kurandi no yome hakuma sonsa ine kantar dila chanchugi sem dila dunchi tsugi tokpa ta ngusun tokpa dende ni shayorbes keshi shawaina dinila keba kariyonas pena chanchugi sem ngusun tokpa seadi kandechinas.
내가 셰럽 디시고라스라. chanchuk semslamdi tab the 셰럽 니시고라. 진짜 chanchuk semdi tab 갑들레고 단데 디 셰럽 시고한자 셰럽 디게 된주기 또양 온숨 또야기 율디 다음에 비트한테 다음에 수티 시작하라서 디 찬주고 쌤다 갑둘은 저와를 기면도 왔어요.
그런데 배셔도 그런 고통에 대가르스나 대 가상 난진달라봐.
경관탐 주그래.
나
경관탐 주그래.
말에 네 가사디 파게 디티와 켄사디 TNT 찬주기 쌤 무슨 똑바세 디 돌아 지어만 못한도와. 네 지다 제나디 남바타친 켐바세 디 라얀 디 쌤께 무슨 똑바치 셰스도한테 추슈 디마토 셴발라덴데 디 살랑기 남샤디 셰두디 찬주기 쌤 무슨 똑바덴데 셰민도스라 데 믹스에게 된데 림바덴데 지 셰민도 데가 네가스타 치기민도스라 제선디 치던제나 찬주기 쌤세디 람덴다우치라 레바이나 사덴다우치 토바이나 무슨 똑바 요레스네 지 케체 요르베스 케체 요마데스 Geshe chi kya ves kya
이요마레스 디요마레 dumbaran dumba de shukche chonre mado dumbi yul ti sangiro chanjutero di global nam ni go sangi ngosum tose dilige yo mares dilige yo mares.
And so Bodhichitta belongs to, or the explanation of Bodhichitta is belongs to the explanation of the method side. So Bodhichitta is regarded as method, whereas this presentation that we've just covered is the presentation of the wisdom side, the perfection of wisdom. And so the text explains that with respect to wisdom, there's the wisdom that realizes the ultimate and wisdom that realizes conventionalities. And so with respect to wisdom realizing the ultimate, it was said that there is a conceptual realization of selflessness, which means a realization of selflessness that utilizes a generic image. And then there is a perceptual realization of selflessness. So there was no reference to wisdom that realizes bodhicitta or perceptual realization of bodhicitta. So in my discussion with Geshe, I said that this point actually came up yesterday in the shoot. We're studying currently, what are we studying? The ornament for clear realization. So we're studying the ornament for clear realization in advanced study program. And yesterday afternoon, we had a discussion about a perceptual realization of bodhicitta. And so Geshe said that it is indeed correct that when we look at the definition of omniscience, the knower of all aspects, it is said that it perceptually realizes the 10 topics such as bodhicitta. So there's one reference to that. But then during the stages of training, when one still trains to become Buddha, there's no reference at all to a stage where you have conceptual bodhicitta and a stage where you have perceptual bodhicitta. Bodhicitta is involved with having an aspiration that is focused on enlightenment, complete enlightenment. So it is explained in terms of how the strength of the aspiration to attain a state of enlightenment. It's not explained from the point of view of whether it is conceptual or perceptual. It's just explained in terms of how strong your aspiration is to attain the state of enlightenment. Also, there's no reference to whether you realize Buddhahood or enlightenment perceptually or conceptually. At the time of still being a trainee, you train in developing the method side, bodhicitta, through developing to a greater and greater extent the aspiration focused on enlightenment.
Sherab gingen la ya sangye ji yoda meset ra di tangi di sherab re dos de ditta ondi sangye da magi se di nyumu dangjin se da masel ya tuk de bachi ra dangjin se gi yome de sherab gta ni ani dame bi tenni go da de sherab gta su jenda dinji gi to ne ani sangye yobati 아니 리빅 또지 셔럽 네번이 니 온디 딘지 산지 공반디 다 아니 셔럽 또지 네번이 거야지 다 네번이 사회질 다 딘지 징이 찜이 톱고 두삼빈 돈바저러스 라 돈바딜이야 잔주고 셈세고르다 도도 데리다.
Which means in short that when one trains in wisdom, part of the process of training in wisdom is investigating whether it is possible to attain Buddhahood. Can I attain the state of Buddhahood? Is it possible or is it impossible? And so to investigate whether we can become Buddha, what we need to investigate with wisdom is our afflictions. Whether our afflictions, or particularly ignorance of grasping at the self, whether that can be eliminated. Can we eliminate ignorance of grasping at the self? It is wisdom that inquires into that and determines selflessness. What it finds certainty. What becomes certain of is selflessness. And so when it becomes certain of selflessness, wisdom therefore also concludes that it is possible for us to become Buddhas. And so finding certainty in selflessness through the development of wisdom is that which gives rise to the aspiration to become Buddha. When we see that it is possible for us becoming Buddha, not only it is possible for us, it is absolutely certain that we ourselves can become Buddhas. The aspiration to attain that state the aspiration is developed, and this is what we call bodhicitta. Can we pass on the mic to?
So when we spoke about the 5 fields of knowledge in terms of the nature of wisdom, the teachings of these great fields are not so common in our teachings about wisdom. So I'm just wondering whether those come sort of after the realization of selflessness that an enlightened mind would then train in these fields of knowledge, or whether that comes as part of the path. And my second question is the great field of arts and what that refers to.
Dila sherabgi ngodila rikpengenga di deshigabdwa. Ta rikpengenga se di dila pechala ngaso nyamashida tonye mesta. Ta di peche rikpengenga shida pende gyobojene shigirbes. Ta di kesi di gyabojene mashewa ina di kanachina tambo dame toltsane rikpa nenga dende jangogirbes yamana sa tambo tom tsane rikpa nenga dende jangogirbes chewa tambo dire niba dilayan dila zo rikpa di nang la kare karionas. So first of all, in the field of arts or crafts, you have writing, painting tankas, painting deities.
And the mancha di ani one chinata shirim gul from sense or redo rigwinding ana ani pi darikpa soarikpa ani tensik rikpa nandun rikpa ani kare
Dila de kashi de dilayandi mentan gar tandi
ken soarikpa soad mendogo so the so sage da soarikpa dinga jota ji latela soba ani menda shangela soba de some soarikpa do ani soarikpa said so meng shon
she's sorry payandi repang ne dugerba
re sorry what is ani darikba bi kon la ya da ji ngazu kharsa the tayig ne chen ro goraman chen samatina tinan digudas tini tenzi riba da nande riba tenzi riba ngazu da riglam go da jara tin nande riba da so chedro di ting adres
she's dame totsane dende jangirbes
ngela jana dame bi coin bi ratrele pensar was
in a chiden jena also de penade lokdila shida shegi marwa
이내야 지당기 미망체기 장고라다. 시고마마도 맨장이 빼망보라.
저래 pena di chasala so di nanduripa.
지금 남들이보다 공부하실라 아니 참만도 아니 멤버 타상 나가 타상 아니 피기 망부여다 이나 야가라
Shengo chewaina sidurun poche gompala chapsa yor.
찬자여라
So it is indeed the case that some monasteries do not emphasize the training in all those great fields of knowledge, but some do. So within those fields of knowledge, you have, for example, the knowledge of language, which involves not only grammar, but also writing, the rules of spelling or what have you. So that's part of it. Then studying logic or rhetorics, studying the arts, studying Buddhism, but also the study of medicine or healing practices. So that's also something that is included within all of them. And so in my discussion with Geshe, I said that, well, it seems that it is said that this is the nature of wisdom, but still we don't train in that, or we don't emphasize that. We mainly emphasize the study of Buddhism, which is called the inner knowledge or the inner meaning. And so Geshe said that it is true that kind of we emphasize that, but there are institutions that teach all of them, that have branches of different faculties. So you have monasteries that have a branch of medicine or language or grammar, those who do the arts and so forth. It does exist in some places.
다스도 망치야디 아니 surjongchen 소소소 surjongchen라 피숑긴 지다라메와 안 소소소 미시기 아니 게긴틴디 땐 장딩 용구여레스 벤anga 추네르무 지 트르세디 대한 안 소소소 비 뒤주 믹스 땐 아니 드론마도 자산 숑기 젠데디 요마레스.
And sorry, Geshe also said that if you wonder when should I study that, well, it is, if you study that, you can say as a complementary topic to selflessness, to the wisdom of selflessness, it can help the realization of selflessness. It can enrich it. Now, at Sarah Monastery, for example, studying those fields of knowledge is done on a private level. You can say that these are some ancillary studies that one does if one wishes to. Like, for example, Geshe mentioned Chodron Rinpoche that was learned in grammar. And so if you are keen on studying that, then you make your own time and go to teachings with Chodron Rinpoche. All right, so thank you very much. We'll leave it here for now, and we will end up with... Okay. So next week we have the money retreat.
Yeah.
So do you know when the money retreat finishes? Next Friday. So I guess we don't have a Friday session. All right. So we are starting. When are we starting? We starting today, the money retreat, or tonight? All right. So we're starting tonight the money retreat, and so for those of you who wish to attend either the retreat or some sessions or day here and there, you can go on the website and find more details about the money retreat, and feel free to come even just for a session if you wish to. No Sunday teaching. No, we have the money retreat happening, so it's freedom for Geshe and me. All right. For my two collections, vastest space that the master working with effort that is practiced for a great length of time, may I become the chief leading Buddha for all those whose minds, wisdom, eyes blinded by ignorance. Even if I do not reach this state, may I be held in your loving compassion for all lives by Joshua. May I find the best of complete graded parts of the teachings, and may I please all the Buddhas by my practice. Using skillful means drawn by the strong force of compassion, may I clear the darkness from the minds of all beings with the points of the path that I've discerned them. May I uphold Buddha's teachings for a very long time, with my heart going up with great compassion, in whatever direction the most precious teachings have not yet spread, or once spread have declined. May I reveal this treasure of happiness and aid. May the minds of those who wish for liberation be granted boundless peace, and the Buddha's deeds be nourished for a long time, by even discredited path enlightenment, completely due to the wondrous virtuous conduct of the Buddhas and their sons. May all human and non-human beings eliminate adversity and create conducive conditions for practicing the excellent paths, never departed in any of their lives from the purest path praised by the Buddhas. Whenever someone makes effort to act in accordance with the tenfold Mahayana virtues practices, may always be assisted by the mighty ones, and may oceans of prosperity spread everywhere. Are the money retreat sessions on Zoom? Are they on Zoom? Do you know? They're not on Zoom. Just here. Sorry, Chris. It will be just here.